Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical.
Happy 2025. It's Angelica with our New Year overview. And excitingly, we're kind of standing on this threshold of a new year with a lot of good intention setting energy. So we had the new moon on the 30th of December, and then we kick off this calendar year, and we're really thinking about change and setting intentions. And don't worry if you didn't set an intention at the new year. You can always reset. Any point of the calendar can be a new year. So there's no worries about that. But 2025 is particularly packed with a lot of astrological turning points, and I really think they're going to echo through our lives. And so big changes don't come with challenges, of course, and the key is kind of this courage that we need to tap into. Now, last year was a strength year, and we can continue that energy of just kind of, we have to continue being brave and strong and all of those things. And that goes for the personal and the collective, because it's time to face some of the friction that we have in this world and generate some serious heat so that we can change. You know, fire is the great transformer. It's the alchemical transmuter. And so we can kind of co-create this. And we're, starting with Mars in retrograde, and that started December 6th. But I don't want to get too far into it just before I want to say a couple things. So I am covering a number of astrological shifts. And as a disclaimer, I'm not an astrologer, but I read a lot of astrology. And so some of these shifts, they came from different places, but primarily Chani Nicholas has these 6 as like the big ones. And so I kind of took them as jumping off points to kind of share with you my thoughts about them. And also probably her thoughts, and Jill Winterstein, her thoughts, and some other astrologers who's like Mystic Mama is a big one for me that I kind of read. And so anyway, I'm just saying that, if some of these sound familiar, it's because I pull from all those kind of sources of people I read, but I don't come up with them it's not like I'm doing a chart or something like that. But these are the 6 sort of shifts that a lot of astrologers are kind of pointing to right now as the big ones for the year. Okay, so the new year begins. We're already in Mars retrograde, and we're in Mars retrograde until February 23rd. So it started December 6th in the fire sign of Leo, which means, Mars deals with that fiery kind of energy, and then it's in a fire sign, and it's going to shift to Cancer, which is at its detriment, and that happens January 6th. So the year starts out with releasing a lot of repressed frustration and former resentments. And that doesn't mean that we just I've let go of that. No, sir. What you're doing is feeling them, getting frustrated, getting resentful, and realizing I can't continue to go on this way. So remember that this can kind of lead to things feeling worse right now until they get better. You have to deal with the anger, right? That's something I'm made a commitment to this year. It's just I'm going to look at anger. And you can make a commitment to look at anger. And what does that mean? It just means we're going through that process of what happens when I get angry? What is the thing behind the anger? What is the pain? What is the hurt? Maybe it's trauma, but a lot of times it's just those simple feelings of feeling abandoned, rejected, misunderstood, all of those things. So, when Mars kind of goes into Cancer, it can make us feel stuck in situations and not feel like we're moving forward, because remember, Mars is in retrograde. So, it is really a time to center our emotions, go inward, and knowing that arguments might not get cleared up right now, because it is a lot of when you're mixing that fire and then you move into water, it's things sizzle, right? It's hard to tell what the state of the thing is going to be in. So it's really important to just kind of move into anything that's going to bring peace at this moment, and not sort of fire and stoke things up. So, all right, let's talk about some stuff. We'll probably go back to that. I think I wrote more about that. But, all right. So just to kind of cover up some things, the lunar nodes are entering Virgo and Pisces. So the lunar nodes basically are, where we have eclipses. So sometimes not sometimes, you'll see all the eclipses are happening in these polar points, right? The one is 6 degrees from, or 6 signs from the other one, right? They're exact opposites, like Capricorn and Cancer and Pisces and Virgo, right? So this is happening in Virgo and Pisces. So the lunar nodes will shift January 11th, which means our first lunar eclipse is in Virgo. That's on the 13th of March. And then we have a solar eclipse in Aries. That's still, what we've dealt with this year. So that's March 29th. And then 2024. Lunar eclipse in Pisces is on September 7th. And then a solar eclipse in Virgo is September 21st. So you can see all these kind of eclipses this year are going to be in the Virgo-Pisces lunar axis. And they're going to stay there until July of 2026. Okay? And so really these nodes of destiny, we call them, can dictate our fate. Right? And they're what the universe calls upon us to do. So when the north node is in Pisces and the south node is in Virgo, Pisces is super watery and dreamy and intuitive, and Virgo is detail driven and earthy and grounded. So the north node really craves growth while the south node calls for release, and together they kind of create transformation. So these points, when they dictate what eclipses are going to be, where the eclipses are going to happen, now you kind of know what the plot's going to be around these eclipses, right? So when we had our first Pisces eclipse was September 2024. And so now we're going to kind of see some of those seeds that we planted, what are they turning into? So it's a time to get grounded, but don't lose your connection to that Pisces energy, which is really dreamy and magical. Okay, and then the Virgo eclipse is going to ask us to look at our relationship with perfection and micromanaging and control issues. So you might find yourself questioning, what am I ready to let go of? What am I ready to hand over to someone who I've deemed competent to handle it? Why am I micromanaging them, right? And the answer lies somewhere between what you know and what you intuitively are knowing, right? So it is research and intuition. So by the time we go back to that Aries eclipse on the 29th, we'll be wrapping up those lessons around conflict and anger. Okay, so just know that, this is a really ripe time while Mars is in retrograde, and, we're kind of looking at that March 29th with the Aries eclipse to be okay, I'm ready to wrap up this relationship I have with anger and asserting myself in a way and navigating conflict, right? How do I assert myself, and is it pushing people away, or am I, how am I navigating conflict? Aries is really, important that we look at these things when we're in Aries, with things like the Mars retrograde or with an eclipse. So as long as you kind of remain grounded and present, you can kind of get through these things. Eclipses aren't really about forcing things. They kind of are the shadow, right? And so what we're doing is we're looking at the shadow. We're changing things, and it's not comfortable. We've got to transform, and that's difficult. Okay, so our next big thing is Venus retrograde in Aries and Pisces. That happens March 1st to April 12th. Now, Venus retrograde starts in Aries and then ends in Pisces. So we're going to have two different kind of energies shifting, right? So Venus is the planet of love and creativity and connection, and it goes retrograde about every 18 months or so. And this time it's starting in Aries and ending in Pisces. And we can kind of think of this as a 40-day period where we're looking at our relationships and creative projects. So whether you want to like push through things or go inward. It's really a time to recalibrate. Okay, so when Venus starts moving backwards in Aries, we'll want to reevaluate our personal relationships to see if there's an emotional or intellectual connection rather than just physical. Aries is a very physical sign, so we want to kind of go back and, okay, all right, let's look at this. Do we have an actual connection, right? And the moment Venus kind of goes retrograde into Pisces, which is the 27th of March, we want to watch ourselves in how we are using emotions to get what we need or to resolve things. We have to watch our fawning tendencies during that time, because Pisces is a mutable water sign, so it moves to adapt to other people. And a lot of times that kind of codependent instinct can get them into trouble, right? Because then they're making concessions to their values, and we don't want that to happen. So you're always watching, like, how am I resolving things? Am I ignoring big red flags just to make peace, or just to, make that person feel safe or whatever? It's important for us. It's also, Venus retrogrades are times when old flames kind of come on into the DMs. So ask yourself, what lessons are you here to teach me? Instead of, oh, cool, you want to hook up. It's not always about that. Like, unresolved friendships can happen, old flames can happen. It's really about asking yourself what lessons they hold, right? And so by the time Venus goes direct, you've worked through a lot of this stuff, right? Because I even like that it's like Aries and Pisces. You're dealing with two different aspects of Venus, right? The physical versus the emotional. Okay, so our third big thing is Neptune entering Aries. Now, Neptune is in Aries from March 30th to October 22nd. Now, Neptune is really kind and magical and a little odd, and it really fights for personal beliefs, for mysticism, and for romance, and it arrives in Aries. Okay, so we're kind of looking at the planet of dreams and delusions, and it's stepping into this action-oriented Aries, and so things can really shift, right, for you. Now, this is kind of a major shift because Neptune only changes signs every 18 years. So while the energy can kind of feel a little off as it's shifting, it can inspire you to like kind of take a stand in what you believe in. Aries is action, right? It also can blur the lines between fact and fiction. So we always have to kind of stay grounded and discerning and check in, right? Especially when it comes to like spiritual or political, I want to say propaganda, because there are times when we get all this like scary information in the spiritual world or in the wellness community of like, you can't trust the government to give you a vaccine or something like that, and then everybody's like, yeah, let's just know, and it gets really, it can be a really toxic environment, just as much as the political stuff. So we just have to continually stay grounded, okay? So Neptune will retrograde back into Pisces later in the year, in October, and just give us a little bit of a breather, because Neptune likes being in Pisces. When Neptune's in Aries, it's a little harder. But once Neptune goes back into Aries, it is there till 2039. So this is kind of what's happening now. So Neptune will be hanging out in those late degrees of Pisces at other times of the year, and that kind of makes us aligned with Pisces' dreamy, intuitive energy. Okay, so just stay strong with that. Another planet entering Aries, another big one this year, is Saturn's entering Aries from May 24th to December 1st. Now, Saturn moves forward on May 24th. So it's moving, through this. And so Saturn is the planet of discipline and rules and how we approach, like, the way things are done, right? And when it's in Aries, it challenges us with this fiery ambition to get like, okay, but what are the rules going to be? Does fire like rules? No, not too much. So it's really a time to redefine how we use our drive, our aggression, our anger. How are we intentionally using those things? Saturn has a reputation for being really tough. And in Aries, it's all about testing your patience and your grit and your boundaries. So Saturn in Aries is asking us to be in charge, to take control of what will drive us in the moment. And we may decide to, start our own business. That can be one way you use Saturn in Aries. We can assert ourselves when confronted by others. We can be direct. We can ask for what we need. We can make impulsive decisions. But by September 1st, Saturn retrogrades back into Pisces, reminding us to tidy up any fantasies. And then we go back into Aries in 2026. So Saturn's foray into Pisces, so to speak, which does constitute like the bulk of 2025, helps us to decide in that flowy, flexible way. So if you're feeling that Aries pinch, right, a little bit of anger, whatever, it's just really preparing you for what's next, because in 2026 you'll have more Aries, Saturn in Aries. So another big astrological twist is that Jupiter enters Cancer, and that happens June 9th of 2025 to June 29th of 2026. So when Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion and growth, enters Cancer, it's the sign of its exaltation. This is the good stuff, right? This is the cosmic blessing. And so Cancer's energy is very nurturing and homey, and it just amplifies Jupiter's ability to bring abundance and wisdom and wealth and caretaking and emotional healing and community building. So it is a rare transit. It happens once every 12 years. So if you're ready to kind of dive into it, this is a really good time to look at vulnerability and align like your outward self with the inner self, like your actions matching your emotions. So this is the time, to think big and dream big and watch the universe kind of return what you need. So, Jupiter moves into its favorite sign, and that makes it exciting, right? It will be kind of before Cancer will be in Gemini for half the year. And so Jupiter in Gemini is all about fostering communication with other, positive communications with other, to kind of move into our local community and try to get involved. So Jupiter in Cancer asks us to expand our emotions. Jupiter in Gemini asks us to expand our communications. So we'll be able to kind of first communicate and then move into the heart, right? So our next big thing that's happening, astrological thing, is Uranus enters Gemini, and that's July 7th to November 7th. And so Uranus is beginning its 7-year switch on July 7th. So from July 7th to November 7th, Uranus, which is like the rebel planet, moves into Gemini, and it kind of helps us to use our words as our revolutionary stand, right? So we'll share our thoughts and experiences, and we'll either write or talk, but, sharing words is going to be really important, sharing stories. Now, Uranus will be in Taurus the other parts of 2025. So it's going to kind of tame sentimentality, but Uranus in Gemini brings our true selves out to the front and allows us to be free. So since 2019, Uranus has been in Taurus, and that disrupts everything from the supply chain to climate policies. And in Gemini, it's coming for how we communicate, think, and share ideas. So the 7-year cycle will revolutionize journalism, social media, and the way we exchange information. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I mean, I would prepare for breakthroughs. I would prepare for chaos. But Uranus kind of thrives on instability and chaos. So it's through that chaos that innovation is born, that we have to stay resilient, and our mind has to be flexible. So I would say it's probably going to get weird, So stay curious, embrace the paradoxes, let your words spark change, say what you mean what you say. Now, other things that are happening, there's, of course, 3 Mercury retrogrades, which happens every year. So March 15th to April 7th, Mercury retrograde occurs in Aries and Pisces. July 18th to August 11th, Mercury retrograde happens in Leo, and that pushes us really to, kind of rush out there and say what we need to say, and maybe not always in the nicest way. November 9th to the 29th, Mercury retrograde happens in Sagittarius, and then it backslides into Scorpio on November 18th. But so we're looking at a Sag Scorpio, but this is, a big emotional one. So we have 4 different eclipses. I kind of talked about it in the beginning of the podcast, but March 9th, there's a total lunar eclipse in Virgo. On March 29th, there's a partial solar eclipse in Aries. Now, the lunar eclipse in Virgo motivates us to kind of be more analytical and kind of look at organization and things like that. Efficiency, right? Whereas the 29th of March, with this partial solar eclipse in Aries, we're looking at a lot of sex energy, right? A lot of carnal impulse. On September 7th, there's a total lunar eclipse in Pisces, and that's more of a, I kind of am moving around like the waves, it's sort of like, oh, everything is beautiful, it chases romance, it chases fantasy. So that can be good, especially if you're someone not prone to fantasy, but it can also be challenging. Now, September 21st, there's a partial solar eclipse in Virgo, which is one of the ways that we can kind of let go of our fears and look at that stuff. Virgo is very practical. It has anxiety. Virgo has a kind of anxiety that the mutable signs can hold, of like things are shifting and I have to shift and blah, 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 blah. But it is also grounding. It kind of stays with the logical, right? So 2025 is really asking us to show up and stay sharp. There's a lot of shifting of planets that shift like less frequently than just say like Mercury going retrograde, right? So we're shifting planets. That means we're shifting big ideas in our society, okay? It's not going to be subtle. It's going to be transformative. So expect that. And transformation might be an interesting word for 2025 in the sense that we are facing a year in numerology and tarot that, when I work with years, I add up all the numbers of the year, break it down to a number between 1 and 21, and then match it with the major arcana card. And so our archetype that we're working with kind of comes through this wisdom and transformation, because the number is 9, and so we are working with the Hermit this year. So Hermit years are interesting. So let me just say, like, when we work with these archetype numbers, you can keep it like, so for example, if your number is 21, you can still break it down to a 3. You can keep adding. So some people are like, oh, I don't understand this. You just add every number in the year. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 7. That's 9. Okay? So, and you can figure out your own card of the year and your own life path by it. Life path would be adding all the numbers of your birth date. So for me, I'm January 4th, 1974. So I would do 01, O plus 1 plus 0 plus 4 plus 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 4. Okay? And that gets to be, I forget if it's 26. And then you break it down to 8. So my life path card is strength. So when I'm figuring out what is my card this year, my personal card, I would add 1 plus 4, because I'm January 4th, 1 plus 4 plus the current year. 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5, 2025. So 1 plus 4 plus 9, that's 5 plus 9 is a 14, which is temperance. Okay, that's my card of the year, and you can figure out your own. But when I talk about a collective card of the year, we're working with the Hermit. And I was doing a vision board get together with my friends, and what came up for that was that everybody related to the hermit in some ways. Like, it wasn't like people were like, oh God, I don't get that. It was like, yeah, that is my card of the year, the hermit. But also then we get a secondary information of, okay, I've got the hermit and temperance, So I'm working with both of those. All right, so when we work with a card that has such a recognizable archetype, I can say, cool, like, what this is, we can just move on. But I really think that he's not who you think he is. And generally the hermit kind of evokes this sense of an old guy in the woods in a cabin, eschewing human interaction, cooking up alchemical recipes or chemistry, reading books, surviving on what he forages around the place. And so we look at that, and that can be delightful. It can be Merlin. Or on the other extreme, it can be the Unabomber. So who is the hermit, and why is he coming for us this year? Well, the solitary figure on the hermit is one of those mysterious archetypes that we have in the tarot, the wise man. He isolates. He goes into seclusion. And his isolation generally is not because something happened to him and he's just like, I'm pissed off, I'm going into a woods. No, he's seeking something. He goes into seclusion for spiritual awakening. And we see this happen in a lot of, I can't think of one where you would not go into, the woods by yourself or the desert or whatever. So we can see that with Siddhartha in Buddhism, going and joining ascetics in the woods to find enlightenment, and then coming out and talking about the middle way, right? Monks joined silent orders or secluded in a monastery. Jesus went to the desert. Moses went to get, to the mountain. So we see these figures kind of going inward, going in alone to have a direct experience with the divine, okay? And, some people will see this, especially in the Fool's Journey. The Fool is the 0 card, that he's gone through all the travails of life, right? He meets the mother and the empress, the father and the emperor, the Hierophant in the 5th card, and then, that's education and schooling and getting out there. Then he meets his lover, and then he goes and starts conquering things in the Chariot. He goes out and tries to make a name for himself. And in the 8, he has to be strong from what he learned. But in the 9, he starts to understand that he is only mid-quest, and that there are answers to the mysteries of the universe and the elements and the infinite that he's not going to get through school, marriage, making a name for himself, and working for a living. So this is what he does. He goes out to the mountain to get information. So we know that people don't usually go out into the woods when they have the long beard, right? They usually go out beardless with dark hair, So we know that he's been up there for a while. Now, the key words for the hermit are wisdom, knowledge, intuition, spiritual connection, guides, teachers. So this card represents all that embodies the spiritual quest. One of the things that is often not mentioned with the hermit is the discipline of the spiritual quest, right? He's not up there binge watching Friends and, eating popcorn. He's up there meditating. He's up there connecting. He wants answers. So when we meet the hermit, he's holding this lamp that is shining in the darkness, and that lamp has a Merkaba, and the Merkaba is a sacred geometry that is used in alchemy, but it's used in Kabbalah. Sorry, I pronounced that wrong. It's used, right, as the symbol of enlightenment. So he's going out looking for enlightenment, and we don't know if he's coming out ready to share the wisdom or coming out saying, I don't know what the hell I just found out. But the hermit comes after we've kind of accepted the lessons of strength. So what did you learn in 2024 about strength? About your own strength, your courage, or powerlessness at times. because we get both lessons, the upright lesson and the reverse. So, when we're moving into this is the time to go inward, whereas, we have been outward for most of the Fool's journey. Okay? So we're going in, moving into a place where everything's silent, where we're just waiting for answers, So the Hermit can be about us going out for that search, or can be about us starting to step into the role of teacher and sharing that knowledge. Now, one thing I have to say is that he's not in a cave. He's not in his little wherever he's been living. As they say, it's really easy to be a holy man on top of the mountain. And what that means is that when you're connecting with spirit and divine and you're cut off from the distractions and irritants of life, it's easier to get enlightened. That doesn't mean that only people in that scenario will get enlightened, but we absorb and learn through those meditation, prayer books, and reading. But when we interact with the messy, imperfect, complicated humans that are around us, that's when we know if our spirituality can be applied to life, right? And this is really how we measure our spiritual wellness. In AA, there's a guy that used to always say, like, if you want to know how I'm doing, ask my wife. Like, if you want to know if I'm doing my work, ask my wife. Because it's directly connected. If he's being unkind to his wife, short, snippy, rolling his eyes, blah, 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 he's not doing well spiritually. So when the Hermit kind of completes this cycle of solitude and he's learned all he can, he comes off the mountain and has to live that spiritual life. I love that he's looking at his shoes. That was another thing I learned, at Buddhist monastery, is someone said, a wise man knows the top of his shoes. It means, the wise man's looking where he's going, but he's not getting distracted by life, right? He's just watching, this is where I'm going, right? Maybe he kind of knows that he has to find a community. He has to search for a teacher. He has to understand what just happened to him. Now, the one thing about the Hermit that's great is that there's so much wisdom already in him. He can be your guide, right? But Pema Chodron says this thing that I love. She says, if we learn to open our hearts, anyone, including the people, maybe most importantly, the people who drive us crazy, can be our teacher. So the Hermit is just this paradox that asks you to balance aloneness with moving out into the world, right? And applying your spiritual knowledge. So even though he is a solitary figure, and he's not lonely, is he? He gathers knowledge. He makes space for him to deal with any loneliness that comes up, right? Meditating on the ways in which you've used aloneness as a tool for strength and inner knowledge can be very helpful when you work with the Hermit. It often has a reputation, at least in readings that we do, like for love or relationships, that it's like you're alone. It's just you. And so the Hermit has that reputation of being alone, but in the picture, he's coming out of aloneness and interacting with people. So when we're in a year of the Hermit, we're really seeking answers. We're seeking a teacher. We're often becoming the teacher in some ways and seeking other people who are either our equals or people that we can learn from. Because we have all this info that we just collected, and we have to process it, and we can't process it alone. So it is a year of being internal and being more introverted, but ultimately we seek to understand ourselves. If the idea of the year is seeking you frightens you, then maybe you need to move towards that, not away from it. So I believe, a lot of times we kind of already feel that stuff within our relationships or what we're talking about or what we're writing about. We feel that loneliness. And so the Hermit's like, let's deal with that. Same with anger. When the Hermit's sitting in the mountain, in the cave up, that's what he's dealing with. His anger, his aloneness, his solitude, all those things. So when we get this card and this becomes an archetype for the year, we're looking at different kinds of crossroads, right? We're getting clarity on what our goals are in life. Okay? So humility is also a big part of this, right? Because we know he has wisdom, and yet he's still trying to find someone to process it with, a teacher. And, I think it's really nice to kind of work with the Hermit for our spiritual condition. I've had journeys, and I've had a lot of students who have had journeys, and the Hermit comes up, it appears, because the Hermit is the guide of the self, the guide of spiritual growth. So, we embrace beginner's mind with the Hermit as well. So the questions I would kind of ask and work with the Hermit is, is this you? Or is this a teacher coming into your life? Because sometimes this represents that person who's come down and now has shown up and shined the light so that you can connect with that teacher, right? And then, how do you connect with your inner Hermit today? Have you made time to journey, to study, to read, to meditate, to explore your beliefs? And how has your spirituality come out today? How has it been integrated into your regular, quote unquote, regular life? So this, Merkaba can be shined into any part of your life where there's darkness. So kind of think about where is there darkness, and think about what it means. Do you have a teacher or a mentor? What does it look like for you? Are you showing up with them? Are you continuing to do the work? Those things are important questions when we work with the Hermit. So I hope you enjoyed this little 2025 overview of the astrology and the card of the year. Have a good 2025.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.